And now we're going to move forward to our first panel of the day, which is going to be coordinated by our colleague Alexandra Desi. And the panel is titled Mediating Gender and Sexualities, Narrative Representations and Methodologies.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. As Zenaida said, my name is Alexandra and I will be moderating this panel. And first of all, I would like to thank you, Zenaida, for this wonderful conference and for inviting me to moderate this panel. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. Our first speaker is Alaitz Saez-Suárez from the University of Barcelona, Spain. The presentation is titled The Role of Media in Shaping Butch Identity in Spanish Younger Generations. So Alaitz, thank you very much, and please go ahead when you want.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Alaitz Saez-Suárez, and today I'm here to present the research I carry out as my master thesis on the role of the media in the construction of butch identity among Spanish younger generations. And research was to analyze how Spanish younger generations express and construct butch identity, taking into account various factors that might contribute to this construction, including the media. Anyway, this general objective was broken down into three more specific goals. First, to investigate how Spanish younger generations understand butch identity. Second, to analyze the role played in this process both by the media in general and more concretely by the hegemonic media representation of this identity. And finally, to explore what other key factors may have influenced this process. For this purpose, it is first essential to define what is understood as butch identity in this research. Butch identity originates from the butch femme culture that began to develop in the United States in the 1950s, 1960s, a period in which a distinct lesbian culture emerged for the first time in history. Within this context, the lesbian community was divided into two clearly subdefined subgroups. Femmes, who embodied traits traditionally associated with femininity, and butches, who adopted characteristics more closely associated with masculinity. So consequently, butch identity could be defined as the imitation of masculinity by those individuals who, within the construction of the binary gender system, were denied the possibility of performing that masculinity, revealing the imitative origin of gender and consequently of masculinity itself. In any case, because this identity visibly subverts the heteronormative system, it is also more exposed to invisibility and discrimination. For this reason, it is particularly important to analyze and make visible the violences faced by individuals who identify in this way. Thus, this research falls within the field of the queer media studies, although, as will be explained later, it has also drawn on theories more closely aligned with social constructivism and cultural studies. In any case, with regard to queer media studies, it is a discipline that seeks to analyze, among other things, the representation of different sexualities and gender expression in the media, paying particular attention to the power structures that might underlie this representation and the impact that such narratives can have both on the social normalization of these identities and on the identity construction of individuals who might identify with this representation. So, although there has been an increase in queer representation in the media in recent years, it is equally important to pay attention to the type of representation being presented. In this regard, the media representation of butch individuals is almost non-existent, and in the rare cases where a more masculine lesbian has been included, they are typically framed within marginal settings, depicted with a possessive and jealous attitude towards their partners, and even represented as evil, impulsive, and aggressive. In any case, although it is important to consider the role that media can play in shaping public opinion and individual identity, it is also essential to acknowledge the audience's role in the assimilation of these messages. Accordingly, this research has chosen to adopt a more critical perspective regarding the audience's role in relation to the media, a view supported by certain theoretical disciplines derived from social constructivism and its uses and gratifications theory, which argue that audiences can take a more critical, active, and participatory role in relation to media messages. Moving on to the more methodological part of the research, a mixed methods approach was adopted, based on a questionnaire and a series of in-depth interviews. Regarding the questionnaire, it was organized into 3 sections, each designed to gather information about one of the specific objectives mentioned at the beginning. In this sense, regarding the first block of the questions on various socio-demographic variables, a total of 14 questions were included, covering participants' relationship with the term butch, their age, place of birth and current residence, level of integration within the queer community, gender identity and expression, and finally, sexual orientation. Moving on to the second block of questionnaire questions, the survey model proposed by Lejabot, King, and Simoni to measure gender expression among women belonging to sexual minority groups was adapted to gather information on how butch identity is expressed today. Specifically, the model included 3 sets of questions on physical appearance, emotional expression, and gender roles, stereotypically associated with butch identity, all to be answered using a 5-point Likert scale. And finally, as for the third block of the questionnaire concerning media use of participants, the model used by Doest and Van Oetzell in a study on media use by queer individuals was adapted. This section consists of 3 questions regarding media use at 3 different stages of life. The first, media contact with homosexuality, the stage of exploring one's own sexual identity, and finally, the most recent year. In total, a total of 282 responses were obtained. Of these, 195 were finally taken as the sample for this research after filtering by age, in this case from 18 to 30 years old, and place of birth or upbringing, in this case, the Spanish state. Thus, once the results database was filtered, first, I carry out a descriptive analysis of each of the 80 variables obtained, and secondly, I carry out a bivariate analysis to check for possible relationship between these variables. Likewise, a total of 4 in-depth interviews were conducted to complement, nuance, and elaborate on this quantitative data. Thus, through semi-structured interviews, the aim was to cover aspects similar and complementary to those addressed in the questionnaire, in particular, how the butch identity is understood and what models and discourses about it might have been received through media. So, moving on to the results obtained from both the quantitative and qualitative methodologies, the first conclusion related to the first specific objective, that is to try to investigate how the new Spanish generation understand the butch identity, is that the new queer generation maintain a less binary conception of gender. This, when applied to the construction of butch identity, is causing an expansion in the diversity of people who can identify with this identity. In this sense, this expansion of the butch subject has shifted this identity from lesbian communities to queer communities, which, along with the advancement of feminism, is causing a reconceptualization of the way butch identity is constructed today. In this way, the results obtained in this research show how, even though certain butch aesthetic aspects associated with masculinity are indeed present, there is not as much agreement with those elements related more to emotional expression or binary gender roles, that is, with the performativity of an hegemonic and traditional masculinity. Consequently, according to the perceptions gathered in the interviews conducted, even though individuals who identify as butch choose to have a clearly masculine aesthetic, this doesn't imply that they also choose to follow emotional behavior typical of hegemonic masculinity, opening the possibility to feel, behave, and relate from very different positions. However, and in relation to the second specific objective of this research, that is to analyze the role that both the media in general and the hegemonic media representation of this identity have had in this process of butch identity construction, reality doesn't seem to match the hegemonic representation of this identity that has been portrayed in the media. In any case, if we observe the results obtained from both the survey and the interviews, it appears that the most influential media in their identity exploration have been the internet and social media. Consequently, it seems that faced with a lack of references and role models in traditional mass media, young people turn to the internet in search of figures with whom to self-identify and to resolve doubts about their gender and sexual identities. After all, the internet and the media related to it, such as social networks, enhance the dissemination and access to self-representation of normative identities, that, according to the interviewees, these have been much more revealing and sparing examples when it comes to constructing their own butch identity. Therefore, it appears that it is not that the media are not influential in the way Butch identity is constructed today, but rather that new generations have had to turn to alternative media to find information about their identity in the face of the stigmatization and misinformation they seem to receive from more traditional media. In any case, given that these self-representations are less accessible formats and are therefore almost exclusively consumed by those individuals within the community who need to find those references with which to identify, the visibility of this self-representation remains restricted to a more queer audiences. In this way, while new butch generations are reconceptualizing, complexifying, and enriching the way they develop their identity, the rest of society, completely unaware of these dynamics, continue to shape its perception of this identity based on its representation in more mainstream content. As a result, the collective imaginary of this identity appears to remain intact. In any case, it is also important to consider some difference regarding media use by new batch generation. In this way, within the batch community, the research for reference and information on digital media varies somewhat precisely depending on how normative the individual's own identity is in each case. Thus, the internet has been a particularly influential media during the exploration of one's own identity for non-binary individuals and for those who consider that they have a more masculine gender expression. Likewise, media such as dating apps or pornography have had a greater influence on individuals who identify both as woman and as butch. These individuals who identify as women are, in turn, the ones who feel less integrated into the LGBTQ+ community. Consequently, these media could be used as substitutes for some of the functionalities offered by being integrated into the community. Thus, dating apps could be a way to meet people from the community, while pornography could be a space for learning. On the other hand, following this gender perspective, individuals who identify with other gender identities, as well as those who maintain a more masculine self-perception of themselves, indicate that books have been particularly influential over the past year. After all, as also based on the perception gathered during the in-depth interviews, books are one of the media through which participants also access real stories of butch people. Finally, and in relation to the third specific objective of this research, that is to explore what other key factors might have influenced the way new generations are constructed their butch identity, in addition to those media self-representation, the new generation assign key importance to their social environment with regard to the construction of their butch identity. In this sense, they highlight the importance of participating in queer spaces and having an equally queer environment. Specifically, it appears that friends and partners are the social agents that have the most influence in this regard. Furthermore, considering that the survey respondents reported feeling quite integrated into the queer community, it is likely that for many participants, their partners or friends are people from their circle who also belong to the LGBTQ+ community, and consequently are individuals who are more informed and empathetic regarding non-normative identity issues. In summary, with regard to the first specific objective of this research, the study's results indicate that beyond that traditional conception of the butch identity as a signifier for lesbian women who have a masculine expression, new generations are expanding the subject of this identity to include any individual for whom, following the binary gender structure, the performativity of masculinity was not expected. With regard to the second specific objective, given that traditional media are not capturing these changes, they are not being very helpful in terms of the exploration and experience of the participants' own identity, and the participants, on the contrary, prefer to use digital media where it is easier to find self-representation with which to identify. And finally, and in relation to the third specific objective, the new generation assign key importance both to participating in queer spaces and to having an equally queer environment that is knowledgeable about the current reality of the butch identity and is free from the negative prejudices that continue to predominate in society at large. Likewise, the present research is limited to a specific age range and to the geographical context of the Spanish state. As such, it constitutes a first approximation to the subject of study, opening multiple lines of research that will be further explored in the doctoral thesis I have recently begun. I am sharing here the bibliographic reference I use in the research in case they may be interest to someone, and I hope you found my presentation interesting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alaitz, for this insightful presentation. We'll move now to our next presentation. So Longlong, if you want to begin sharing your PPT while I present you.
Okay. Can you guys hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, perfectly. Try to share my screen with you.
Okay. So our second speaker is Longlong Ge from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. The title of her talk is Becoming Child in Angela Carter's Wise Children. Longlong, thank you very much, and please, you may begin.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. Hola a todos. Hello, esteemed fellow scholars. I was fascinated by all of your insightful presentations. It's truly an honor for me to have interdisciplinary communication with you online. My name is Longlong, a PhD candidate from the University of Nottingham, and my presentation today is entitled Becoming Child in Angela Carter's Wise Children. Let me begin with a simple but important question. Who are the children in Wise Children? Are they girls or boys? And why does Carter call them wise? So at first glance, the children in Wise Children refer to the twin sisters Dora and Nora Chams, who grown up as illegitimate daughters of the famous Shakespearean actor Sir Malcolm Hazard. Born on the poor side of the River Thames and the wrong side of legitimacy, the sisters are raised by Grandma Chams, who is not related to them by blood. Narrated by Dora on their shared 75th birthday, but also Sir Malcolm's and Shakespeare's birthday. What a coincidence. So you guys maybe can guess which day it is. And the story reveals the sisters' lifelong ironic encounters with the Hazel family and their eventual embrace of a self-fashioned marginal kinship network. So their wisdom, however, is not a product of formal education or patriarchal inheritance. As Shakespeare writes in The Winter's Tale, a wise child knows its own father. Yet Carter deliberately subverts this idea. Why their father knows their children? The Chang sisters reject the legitimacy that the Hazard promises, choosing instead to claim their own family through acts of self-authorship and care. Their wisdom also recalls Carter's statement in her non-fictional essay. Children, since they are polymorphously perverse by nature, and furthermore do not usually possess property, can be much nicer, wiser, and kinder than culture. The trans twins precisely embody this polymorphously perverse nature, like fluid, inventive, and unstable. In this sense, the title Wise Children encapsulates Carter's reworking of kinship, genealogy, legitimacy, and temporality, turning the comic family saga into a meditation on how children in every sense can resist and reinvent the structures that define them. My study then places the very notion of the child at the center. According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, the word child has two dominant meanings. So first, a son or a daughter within a family, and secondly, a youth compared to the elderly. And interestingly, I just searched online in Spanish, El Niño, I don't know if I pronounce correct, carries quite a similar doubleness. So, but what exactly do I mean by becoming? The term originates from the French post-structuralist philosophers Deleuze and Alexis Saez, who developed becoming, devenir in French, to address what the Western traditional ontology being struggles to address. Whereas being implies sameness, hierarchy, and identity, becoming emphasizes movement, multiplicity, and transformation. It is an ethical and political concept that resists the pull of sameness and opens new possibilities of existence. Deleuze and Godard extend this notion to various minoritarian becomings, such as becoming woman, becoming animal, and my focus today, becoming child. Each of these describes a process of breaking away from dominant, majoritarian subject positions. In the context of white children, the authority opposed to the child is clearly that of the parents and the adulthood. By drawing on Deleuze and Godard's philosophy to reread Carter's novel, I seek to explore how the trans sisters' narrative embodies the becoming child, a continual process of deterritorialization through which they resist genealogical, temporal, and moral constraints and redefine what it means to be both wives and children. In terms of child in the family, at the beginning of the novel, Dora and Nora young to be recognized as the daughters by their biological father, Melchior. But at this stage, Dora and Nora trap into two crucial confusions. So first, they conflate their love for theatrical performance with their yearning for their father's recognition. Since Sir Melchior is the most celebrated Shakespearean actor of his generation, he becomes, in the sisters' eyes and the other people's eyes, a symbolic embodiment of the entire theatrical world. The sisters' desire for their father's approval then mixes up with their passion for stage performance. However, in fact, their genuine artistic awakening and perseverance stem not from Melchior's influence, but from Grandma Chums and Uncle Perry, who enlighten and support their talents and dreams, financially and spiritually, as well as from their own relentless commitment to performance. This displacement of mentorship reveals Carter's critique of patriarchal lineage. Creative agency and artistic inheritance do not flow from the father, but circulate through channels of care and love and collaboration. Secondly, the sisters conflate their longing for a loving family with their longing for paternal recognition. What Carter subtly portrays is that Dora and Nora never naturally or originally desired a father. Their attachment to Melchior arises only after Grandma Chums and Uncle Perry repeatedly explain the social meaning of parents to them. How the father and mother are supposed to signify belonging, legitimacy, and love. The twins' later yearning, therefore, is not spontaneous, but learned. Kinship, Carter suggests, do not flow through bloodlines, but more importantly, through loves. Then their illusion of paternal redemption collapses at the moment of crisis. When Dora and Nora face a life-threatening fire, their biological father does not come to their rescue. Instead, he values a mere paper crumb. It's just a symbol of his theatrical glory more than his daughters' lives. At that moment, the sisters realize that what they have longed for is not a role of father, but the father's care and love. As Celestino Diletto observes, the Chum sisters then displace their longing for paternal love onto Uncle Perry, whose warmth and generosity provide them with the emotional and financial sustenance denied by Melchior. In this one, if the father figure can be substituted, so can the mother. The maternal role in their lives is always fulfilled by Grandma Chums, who raises and educates them with humor, resilience, and an ethic of care that defies the sentimental ideal of the self-sacrificing mother. Together, Uncle Perry and Grandma Chums embody the nurturing forces of a non-patriarchal kinship network, one that the twins actively invent. In this process, becoming child emerges as an act of creative resistance. The child in Carter's fiction is not a passive recipient of lineage, but an agent who remakes kinship per se. The Chang sisters create a new kind of family, one that gathers together those excluded by bloodline and legitimacy. Their household includes not only Lady A, who's Melchior's ex-wife, but also orphans, single mothers, and later their cousins' abandoned twin daughters. Through adoption, godmothering, and chosen bonds, Dora and Nora demonstrate that family can be generated through care and empathy. the Chang sisters' expanding household operates as what Deleuze and Guattari call a body without organs, a family constantly in motion, refusing closure or hierarchy. It is not a fixed structure, but an assemblage of affective relations where roles shift and connections multiply. In this open-ended family, the child is no longer the endpoint of reproduction, but the force that keeps a family becoming. As Deleuze and Guattari remind us, once a child has grown up, he finds himself deeply involved in social relations that are no longer familial relations. In most traditional narratives, childhood is perceived as a transitional phase, a preparatory stage toward rational and responsible adulthood. Deleuze and Guattari, however, challenge this developmental teleology by suggesting that the child is the becoming young of every age. Carter similarly rejects the notion of linear growth and maturity. In Wise Children, the child does not stand in opposition to the adult. Rather, it signifies a different mood of existence. Even for adults, that operates through vitality, openness, and transformation. Becoming child, therefore, is neither a literal regression into infancy or a nostalgia of childhood. It is an ethical and affective orientation that affirms the generative powers of the child's intensities, like humor, creativity, resistance, and non-perception. Dora and Nora embody these forces throughout the novel. Their humor expressed through playful narration, bout jokes, and self-parody functions as a subversion weapon that dissolves the authority of grand historical narratives while resisting the patriarchal impulse to shame and discipline women's bodies. Their comic tone transforms humiliation into agency, re-signifying what might have been social stigma into a space of creative self-definition. The state of non-possession, having neither inherited wealth nor stable property, does not hinder their becoming. On the contrary, it liberates them from the temptations and moral rigidity associated with fetishism. Their financial problem becomes not a mark of defiancy, but generative primus for invention and improvisation. It propels their creativity, sustains their emotional generosity, and keeps their lives in continuous movement rather than arrested by accumulation. And their process of becoming child also unfolds through a temporal dimension. The twins' lives do not follow what Elizabeth Freeman calls chrononormativity, the social clock that dictates the proper timing of like marriage, reproduction, and career success. Dora and Nora never marry, never bear children, and never inherit their father Melchior's Iliad artistic legacy. Yet Carter presents their lives not as failures, but as acts of resistance. By rejecting reproductive futurism and linear progress, the sisters inhabit a queer temporality that emphasizes affective experiences rather than biological succession or financial success. The novel's non-linear narrative mirrors this resistance. It scrambles generosities, collapses distinctions between past and present, and replaces succession with simultaneity. In conclusion, I've examined the process of becoming child in Angela Carter's West Children, where the figure of the child encompasses both the familial and the useful dimensions. Becoming child is not a literal return to infancy or an imitation of childish behavior, but an ethical and effective stance that embraces optimism, creativity, and resistance to normativity. The Dora and Nora, who refers to be born by bloodline or legitimacy, it signifies the power to reimagine kinship and invent new forms of belonging. Their defiance of the social clock of prescribed timelines for marriage, reproduction, and labor demonstrates how the child's forces of becoming open alternative, plural, and life-affirming ways of inhabiting the world. So that's all for today. I greatly appreciate your listening and look forward to further communication with you later. If you are interested in my work, please feel free to contact me via the email address on the slide. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Longlong. I'm sure there will be questions and comments later. So we'll now move to our next speakers. Finally, we have a collective presentation by Víctor Villegas, José Sánchez García, and Bruna Alvarez from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Their presentation is titled Dialogando con jóvenes de sexo, metodología y ética en el uso de técnicas audiovisuales. Please, you have the floor. You can begin sharing your presentation.
Okay, I'm José Sánchez García. I'm an anthropologist. My background and expertise is about young studies in Arabic world. And in this case, in this project, my first role is to think about and reflect about the ethical issues in the project. So my part in the presentation is about the ethical issues.
Great, thank you. Victor, do you want to present yourself?
Yes, my name is Victor Villegas Campillo. I am filmmaker and doctor in social and cultural anthropology, and I live here in Barcelona.
Okay, does it work now?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Bruna.
Thanks. So my name is Bruna Alvarez, and I don't know what to say to introduce myself, but I will introduce myself regarding to this project. So what we are going to present now is a part of the project that Zenaida has and is founded by the Instituto de las Mujeres, and it has like two products. The first one is this conference that we are already doing now, and it has another product that is a film or a documentary, and it's the second part, or we wanted to following the audiovisual production, the sex film production that Estel Malgosa started in 2023 with this documentary that's rethinking sex education or sexual education, and it was broadcast in the Catalan public television. So it had a really big audience, and we could transfer our research knowledge to a lot of people. So following this tradition that Estel inaugurated three years ago, we wanted to do a documentary with teenagers. That it's the research focus of Zenaida's PhD. So apart from this idea, we contacted to Victor and Jose. Victor as a filmmaker, but also in a very particular way, because he has just got his PhD doing a research about participatory methodologies and while young people were doing films. So the participatory methodologies of Victor just pick our attention to ask him for help for this project. And Jose, as he said, is an expert of the ethical part, and we thought that it could be very interesting that he could join to this project. So this is the introduction, and I named the talk. We have thought about doing it in English or Spanish. Perhaps we just switch, but we have a very described PowerPoint. So if we switch to Spanish, you can read basically the information in English written in the PowerPoint. So that's it. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bruna. Bueno, voy a hablar en español entonces. Hoy justamente venimos a presentar algunos primeros pasos del proyecto. Este es el material generado en los talleres que decía Bruna y que forman parte de un proceso de creación de un documental que está actualmente en etapa de exploración y justamente está centrado en personajes juveniles y su mirada sobre la sexualidad y la tecnología. Estos talleres buscan abrir espacios de expresión y pensamiento crítico a través del cine, promoviendo la participación de los jóvenes en la construcción de sus propias narrativas. La siguiente, Bruna, por favor.
Gracias.
Entonces, la sesión uno fueron diferentes talleres, o sea, fueron diferentes sesiones, 3 sesiones en particular, cada una respondía a diferentes formas, ¿no? A diferentes modos de entender la metodología. Eh, el primero de ellos se llama, como tiene que ver con los juegos, era la primera sesión que reunió en un principio a 9 mujeres y un hombre, y se comenzó con este juego de dibujos, ¿no? Pidiendo que cada uno representara de manera colectiva qué se le venía a la mente al escuchar la palabra sexualidad. De forma espontánea surgieron numerosos dibujos, sobre todo de penes, lo que generó risas y comentarios en el grupo. Este momento, aparentemente trivial, permitió romper con el hielo y así haber una conversación más libre sobre imaginarios, estereotipos y formas cotidianas de hablar de sexo. El humor en ese sentido se convirtió en un lenguaje de confianza y la cámara, que observaba justamente sin intervenir en esta primera sesión, empezó a formar parte del ambiente. La siguiente, Bruna, por favor. Luego, una metodología que un poco lo que comentaba Bruna en un comienzo, que yo trabajo con cine comunitario, con metodologías de cine comunitario, y aquí ya empezamos a trabajar con ciertas metodologías, que esta en particular se llama El lugar seguro, que tiene que ver como con la fotografía y, y los relatos, ¿no? Como en reflexiones en torno a la sexualidad. Y en esta segunda sesión bajaron un poco los participantes, fueron 7 jóvenes, 5 mujeres y 2 hombres, y a partir de ahí propusimos un ejercicio fotográfico que tenían que venir con fotografías en que cada participante debía traer imágenes que remitieran, digamos, un espacio que se sintieran tranquilos, protegidos o en paz en relación a la sexualidad. Estas imágenes mostraban habitaciones, patios, rincones del barrio, otras fueron más bien simbólicas y se vincularon a personas, recuerdos o sensaciones. A partir de estas fotografías se generaron relatos y conversaciones sobre intimidad, afecto y cuidado. En este ejercicio se desarrolló la dimensión ética y emocional del proceso, donde la confianza se invitaba a pensar en la sexualidad desde la confianza y el bienestar. Y a partir de ahí empezaron a surgir relatos sobre la intimidad y la sexualidad, ¿no? La siguiente, Bruna, por favor. La siguiente sesión era con una entrevista, es decir, que cada joven cumplía el rol de camarógrafo, iluminador, entrevistado, etcétera, ¿no? Entonces, se organizaron 3 grupos que formularon preguntas sobre la sexualidad, emulando una entrevista al documental, porque siempre en todo momento, digamos, desde el principio, se dijo que esto era un taller exploratorio usando metodologías de cine para hacer un documental participativo en conjunto entre los jóvenes participantes y, bueno, nosotros los investigadores, ¿no? Entonces aquí, en ese sentido, cada uno de los jóvenes asumió un rol cinematográfico que, como dije, era cámara, sonido, luz y el entrevistado. Y también se decía en el modo de jugar también, luz, cámara y acción. Justamente lo que aportaba un tono de juego y profesionalidad al mismo tiempo. La dinámica permitió que los y las jóvenes se familiarizaran con el lenguaje audiovisual y conversaran en un ambiente de confianza y humor. En verdad, más que buscar respuestas correctas, el ejercicio sirvió para escucharse entre ellos y ellas y compartir experiencias y descubrir cómo la cámara podía abrir un espacio de diálogo y atención mutua. A partir de estos ejercicios apareció una pregunta simple pero profunda que se respondió mediante la cámara. ¿Qué es la sexualidad para ti? Eso. Y el minuto Lumière, que es una metáfora, la idea era buscar metáforas que se filmaran en torno a la sexualidad, se realizó un ejercicio que se llama Minuto Lumière, en donde los jóvenes en tríos fílmicos grabaron una toma única de 1 minuto, a partir de una metáfora sobre la sexualidad. Es decir, se realizaron rodajes en el barrio donde se estaba llevando a cabo el taller, en Corberá del Llobregat, aquí en Barcelona, y cada grupo decidió su propia forma de representar aquello que sentía o pensaba sobre la sexualidad, utilizando gestos, objetos o movimientos en lugar de palabras. Los minutos Lumière mostraban justamente, voy a hablar de 2 minutos Lumière, que son cuando 3 chicas trenzaron sudaderas, en sus sudaderas, 3 chicas mujeres trenzaron, digamos, sus sudaderas, y por otro minuto Lumière, otro ejercicio de 1 minuto, era el abrazo de 2 amigas a través de rejas. Estas imágenes, por lo tanto, se transformaron en metáforas visuales sobre la intimidad, el vínculo y, bueno, una manera poética de pensar la sexualidad más allá del lenguaje verbal. El plano fijo, por lo tanto, fue un espacio de reflexión, de expresión y silencio compartido. Y la siguiente, Bruna. Y por último, como reflexión final a esta parte, digamos, la parte más metodológica, el cine como espacio de encuentro y reflexión. El cine, en ese sentido, articula la metodología audiovisual que se basa en el juego y la reflexión. Y como dije, como por etapas, primero fue el dibujo, la fotografía, la entrevista y luego el plano fijo. Las y los jóvenes exploraron distintas formas de hablar sobre la sexualidad y los entornos digitales. El proceso, por lo tanto, no buscó ofrecer respuestas ni discursos cerrados, sino abrir un espacio común donde la cámara pudiera mediar entre lo personal y lo colectivo en diálogo con la emoción y la experiencia. En ese sentido, el medio audiovisual se convirtió en un lenguaje de confianza y en un lugar para pensar y sentir de manera colectiva. Al final de la presentación vamos a compartir los minutos Lumière y ahora vamos a ir a la parte más ética que va a ir José.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present some thinkings about the situation of ethical in the project. So the idea is that the creative process also reveals its own limits and tensions, and some moments inviting us to think about what it really means to participate freely, how friendship and group dynamics can influence decisions, and how ethical protocol sometimes fail to adapt to these realities. From other kind of ethical issues that appears during the process, because this is a work in progress project, we select one to reflect today how are thinking on ethical issues in the project. Can you pass the next one? Thank you. So the first day of the 3-part audiovisual workshop, what happened one situation that is that the group consisted of these 12 people that is very significant that one of the participants was key to securing the participation of these young people, having brought together 2 groups of her friends. One group was from Barcelona, mostly migrant from diverse backgrounds, and the other was from the key participants' hometown, where the workshop was being held. This second group was made up of young people of Catalan origin, including 2 Muslim girls. On the first day of the workshop, the 2 Muslim girls attended. When asked to sing a consent from before the workshop activities had begun, they indicated they would ask their families. They did not attend the second day. Therefore, the aim is to reflect on this process, considering that none of the young people from these diverse backgrounds placed importance on singing the consent for, and at no point mentioned needing parental permission. This highlights the cultural diversity surrounding sexuality and participation in the workshop. This case illustrates a central ethical dilemma in qualitative research with young people: the tension between formal consent protocols and the cultural, social, and relational realities of the participants. Can you pass the next one, please? So, the idea is that this situation demonstrates that the consent process, as implemented requesting a formal signature and at the outset, without prior contextualization, act as a barrier to the participation of the two young Muslim women. Their disappearance the following day after the consent request suggests that the protocol designed for a presumably Western and adult-centric perspective failed to consider the specific cultural context. In many Muslim traditions, sexuality is a family matter, especially for young women, and requiring explicit authorization without informing their elders could have generated conflict or fear of family disapproval. The situation raises the issue of coercion through friendship. The key participants act as a bridge based on pre-existing relationship of trust. The figure of the key participant who pulls others along thanks to her social capital and friendship is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, she is invaluable for accessing the group. On the other, she generates a dynamic of peer consent or relational coercion. Friendship entails loyalties, emotional obligation, and a desire to belong to the group. Deciding not to participate can be interpreted as a lack of support for the friend organizing the activity, or as a disruption of the group cohesion. This creates a subtle but powerful pressure that can negate the individual's freedom of consent. In the case of the young Muslim women, this relational coercion came into direct conflict with their cultural and family norms. Friendship may have led them to a space, the workshop, that they might not have otherwise considered. However, the formality of writing consent acted as a wake-up call, a trigger that reminded them of possibly family disapproval, a weight greater, and then the pressure of the group. Their absence on the second day can be interpreted as the triumph of one normative framework, the familial cultural one, over another, that they of their peers, or simply as evidence of the conflict they felt. The researchers, 2 men and 1 woman, also from diverse backgrounds, must be aware of this dynamic and ensure that consent is truly free and informed beyond the influence of the group. Ethics in this context is not limited to obtaining a signature, but ready to create a space where it is safe and easy to say no, even for those who have a strong sense of friendship with the organizer. Furthermore, for this young woman in the Muslim world, sexuality is like not an individual matter, as we say, but rather a familial one and communal one. Please, can you pass the slide? So, to discuss about ethical issues in the project, we are using the ethical reflexivity presented by Gewirth in 26. This is that we are a complementary exercise to mere compliance review. This is important to discuss about and debate between the researchers and also participants the ethical issues during all the projects. This is I am applying during years in Sahwa project, a project on young people in Arabic countries, in Transga project, a project about young people involved in gangs in 12 cities, in Rasif project about minors, but now we are applying this in the food circuits project. It's a project about agricultural labors in several countries. So this is a really interesting methodology to apply in these kinds of projects. So the dynamics of peer consent and the relational coercion, in this case, exerted by the key participant, are a clear example of a dilemma that a rigid protocol cannot anticipate, but with constant ethical reflexivity could have identified and mitigated. The idea is that the Gewirth involves identifying issues that arise during the research process and resolving them collectively, relying on the expertise of the field workers. Please, can you pass? Researchers relying on this natural leader should have been hyper-aware of this effect. This implies, 1, explicitly decoupling participation from work within the friendship, privately assuring each potential participant that the relationship with a friend will not be affected if they chose not to participate. And third, recognizing that peer consent is low quality consent if it is not supported by genuine individual reflection. In this case, the researcher could have organized a preliminary session with all young people, and actually their families, to explain the project in a less formal setting, use alternative methods of consent, I don't know, such as recorded oral consent, giving the opportunity for young people to consult with their elders about the participation, and four, apply the principle of ethical reflexivity, as I said before, continually reviewing how their methods impact different groups and adapting them accordingly. Can you pass? This is the idea of that we can say to building a smarter and more sensitive ethical framework. We have three strategies to mitigate relational coercion: dissociate participation from friendship, private and individual consent, and gradual consent during the project. Can you pass, please? Thank you. For cultural sensitivity, the idea is that the ethical reflexivity needs a community approach, involves families or community leaders from the same phase to build trust and adapt the method during all the process. And also flexible protocols have alternatives to written consent available to avoid creating unnecessary barriers. Though this, a robust ethical process not only contains a signature, but actively manage social and cultural dynamics to ensure that this young person, yes, is free, informed, and authentic. Please, Bruna, can you pass? Thank you. So, what lessons we are learning about this process? First, in research with young people, ethics must manage not only the researcher-participant relationships, but also the complete ecology of relationship among the participants themselves. The solution lies not only in four, but in building a flexible, consensual, permissible space of action that allows field researchers to address ethical dilemmas based on their expert knowledge of the context. So this is the four main lessons that we apply. Ethics is a process. Ethics is an ongoing process, managing the relational ecology, and the ultimate goal, to build a flexible, consensual space for permissible action. So the last one, because this is also, according to my experience with other projects, this is also we can find also in this project. These final ideas, thinkings, and reflections on ethical issues when you are working with young people in qualitative work. So the workshop demonstrates the inadequacy of rigid ethical models inherited from the biomedical paradigm for addressing the sociocultural realities of youth research. As Faisal and Sánchez García, myself, point out in one publication, research with young people, especially that which employs qualitative methods, such as ethnography, needs to evolve toward a dialogical model that incorporates sociocultural dimensions. In our case, the formal requested form for informed consent at the outset acted as a Eurocentric protocol that did not consider the cultural particularities of young Muslim women. According to our ideas in this paper, this is a special and important idea. The age at which people consider themselves mature adults is culturally contingent. So we need to deal with this situation, which extends to the management of bodily autonomy and participation in sensitive issues. So the idea is that we can try to methodological flexibility, the imperative of ethical reflexivity when you are working with young people, the involves asking, it involves identifying and collective resolving the dilemmas that arise in the field, relying on the local expertise of the field worker. And the question is, are we measuring genuine consent of group pressure? This is the idea that we also discuss in the project. So ethic as a process is a process of continuous adaptation that relies on the researcher's judgment to navigate the complexities of the field. So a universalist protocol, this is also a conclusion, is not ethical if it is not adapted to the specific context. Thank you very much. And now is the time that Victor showed the minute of Lumiere.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much to all the presenters for these rich and thought-provoking contributions. We can begin to wrap up this panel. I wanted to thank again all the speakers and to everyone attending for your engagement. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much again.